Well, the MP for Bassett Law has already spoken. John Mann is piloting a private member's bill through Parliament to make it a crime to have sex with a prostitute who is under 21. Teenage prostitutes mainly work from the streets, the most dangerous place to be. The majority of them have been in care and end up on heroin. Should it be illegal to pay for sex with a young adult? Why do you think this will work, John Mann?
Well, I think it'll work because it'll change. It won't solve all the problems, of course it won't, but I think it'll have an impact because I think it'll change the culture that's there, and it'll create a breathing space to allow more interventions with very vulnerable young women, and indeed also with a group of very vulnerable young men. And I come from this, having done a lot of work in my area on drugs, and young people on drugs, and a lot of work as well on young people who've been thrown out of home or who have left home.
But it's not working at the moment, John. This is the big point. It's not being properly enforced at the moment, the 18 rule, because this is get-out clause. I thought she was 18, so it's not working now. What makes you think that the group of people who use these services, who perhaps have less of a regard for morality, perhaps, less of a regard for the law, are going to have any more regard with a new statute?
Well, there is a threshold, and I think if you raise the threshold, it gives the police the ability to do something about it, and I think it will have an impact, because I think it'll impact on people's behaviour.
Charlie, you're shaking your head.
I wish it would. Can I just say to you that I grew up in care. I'm one of the statistics 60 times more likely to end up homeless, in prison, on the game. I'd managed all three by the time I was 21. And no law would have stopped me from walking the streets. And furthermore...
Why was that? What was the impetus?
Because I needed milk and nappies for my baby. And furthermore, I wouldn't have got off the streets if that had been the case, because brothels in the 80s, back then, were not regulated as such, but there was a code of conduct at that time that said, if you're underage, you don't get to work here. So I wouldn't have even got off the streets.
George, you are the author of the British Massage Parlour Guide. If you were with a girl, would it trouble you if she was 17 or 18?
Obviously, it would trouble me if she was under 18, yes.
Yeah.
But
if she was 18 or over, would that trouble you?
I wouldn't have thought so, no. The essence of the situation is that if we're talking about the girls on the streets, there are laws adequate to safeguard them insofar as there are curb-crawling laws which stop men from doing that there. And in the massage parlours, which have been visited by the Hidden Economy Task Force to make sure that the people in there are paying tax, they're all of the right age, that they're not from abroad. And this didn't receive much publicity.
Are there lots of girls who are 18, 19?
There are girls who are 18 and 19 there, yes, but there are men who are 18 and 19 and 20 going off to Afghanistan and come back in a coffin. There has to be a point at which you become an adult and are responsible for what you do, and that has been decided to be 18.
So if you're allowed to, don't to drink, allowed to join the army, allowed to die for your country, as George said, why shouldn't you be allowed to, distasteful as some may think it, sell your body?
At least when you join the army, it's your free choice. Nobody's forcing you to sign up. There's large...
You don't believe there's autonomy here?
I don't believe every woman is forced.
At any age.
I know that, and I'm very aware that there are some women who do choose that, but there are a vast majority who don't. And
but don't label everyone with the same brush.
I'm not labelling everyone with the same brush, but I've worked for 16 years with women on the streets. I have met 400 to 500 women. I came into this work with no preconceptions, but in 16 years I haven't met a single one of those women who wants to be on the street. Only the other week I was out on our drop-in. 2 of the women who came in wanted to end their lives. That the situations they were in were so bad, so serious.
I agree with that.
Let me just finish,
But you're talking about the streets, and this law is going to affect indoor sex workers, and there are very low incidences of indoor sex workers being attacked.
Okay, let Anne finish, and also come to the point, Anne, is this law going to change things?
No.
I think it will help. It will help because it's about criminalising the demand. It's not criminalising the women on the streets, it's criminalising the demand, and if you can reduce the demand... And I would really ask that if this goes through, that the government seriously looks at resourcing as well, because in this time of austerity, the number of services available to help women off the streets.
It's holistic. It'll be holistic.
It has to be. It has to be housing.
Changing the law doesn't change people's behaviour. We haven't got Sharia law.
Kat, go on.
I work with an organisation that campaigns for policy to be based on evidence.
It's the International
Union of Sex Workers.
Right.
And one of the things we want to do is see policy that's actually based on evidence. And so, for example, one of the points that you made in the run-up to this story is that the average age of entry into prostitution is 15. We know that's not factually correct.
That's the Home Office study, yeah.
Street sex work.
Hold on a sec, Charlie. There's a lot of material has come out of the Home Office. There's a lot of other material as well. The Home Office material often contradicts itself. It's often of poor quality, and it often takes that material out of context.
Yeah.
So actually, if you're looking at the age of entry for indoor sex work, you're generally looking at 20 plus. For outdoor sex work, you're looking at about 16. Okay, so that's one factual point. The other thing in terms of talking about who commits actual crimes of violence against people in the sex industry, the evidence is that it is not people who are paying for sex. Criminalising people who pay for sex and who treat the people that they are paying with respect and consideration makes no difference in terms of actually tackling crimes of violence against us. It sends the message that our consent to discriminate against the consent of people who are
Would it
under 21,
reduce demand?
I doubt very much. The evidence from Sweden, again, is that the demand has not been reduced. And actually, hang on a second. The problem...
Let's take it back over to Anne.
Prostitution has halved in Sweden. It's been massively reduced, and they've had a huge impact on the women, and they've put support services in place, and it's made a real difference.
It's people like you who make the difference, like Genesis in Leeds, and I totally support what you do. And I promise you, you know, I really do think that what you do is amazing, especially bearing in mind you're getting your PCT funding cut. I've seen that with many different projects. You're the guys doing the work for the government, but it's positive intervention with young people in care that would make the massive difference.
It does make a huge difference.
To stop them getting into it,
Helen, how did you get into it?
Turning their lives around once they are.
Helen, you what, 19, were you?
Yeah, I was around 19, 20.
Yeah. Why did you get into it, and how did you get into it?
Redundancy. It was kind of... There wasn't really much more of an option. Well, there was an option. I look now and I think the course was an option now that I'm older. That's why I think the ban coming in would help, but I don't think it'll change anything. If you're in a situation where you do need to provide for a child, then you're going to have to find that. You're going to have to find the ways and means of doing that. But if there was more support in place earlier on in life, I think that would help. I think a massive point as well is how prostitution's actually perceived as well. It's everyone's so quick to judge and kind of point the finger, but yet we have programmes that glamorise it. We have 15-year-olds is that you said it's been statistically proven that some of them are actually prostituting themselves. But these kind of girls are watching programmes like that in the bedroom and think that if they go and sell their body for sex, that they can go and live on the River Thames and have designer clothes and this, that and the other.
Do you think they believe that?
Pardon?
Well, they have a moral framework in their family
they do.
and their home.
At 14, 15 years old, if I'd have seen that, I would have thought, oh my God, you know, I wouldn't have even seen it as such a bad thing.
An issue of materialism? Because it used to be young women got into prostitution out of desperation.
What about now? Do you have...
I understand from both points of view. I've been in a situation where I was desperate for money. But had I been a bit younger and had a bit more support, I'd been in care myself. Okay. And if somebody had said to me and put me in a position where they said, we can do this, that and the other for you, instead of just turfing me out on the street.
But that's what I'm saying,
and just leaving me to it. Yeah, if there was some form of intervention where people came forward and sat down and kind of helped you as a younger age to structure your life. But if you left to your own devices, I think
I'm sure you'd agree.
Okay, wait a minute. I want just to explore this. Would it help? Would it help from the point of view of the men paying if they had if it had been illegal when you were 19 to have to pay for sex with somebody who was 19 years old? Would that have stopped them?
Would that have stopped them from doing it? No. It won't stop them anyway, even if the ban does go in place.
And did you have friends who are still doing what you used to do?
Yeah, but more importantly, I know that there is girls that are in the industry working that are also below 18 and nobody's doing anything about it. The police actually know where these places are, where these girls are working. There's foreign girls working in them as well. and nothing's done about it. In fact, the police know about several places where you can go and pay for sex, and there's girls working there underage, there's girls working there that are actually under false pretences and are going, passing the money on to other people. It's not even for themselves.
They're not doing anything about it now. What makes you think that's going to change, John?
Well, nothing 2 years is going to make any difference, to be honest.
It's not going to solve all the problems, but the reason...
Is it going to solve any of the problems?
Yes, I think the reason it will is, and George said no to 16, 17, 18...
Yes, he said.
Yes. Well, if the threshold's raised to 21, then that will affect the behaviour of some of the people...
Changing the law doesn't change
let's hear from George.
behaviour.
This is George. Would it change your behaviour?
I think what one has to bear in mind is that if someone finds that they have had sex with someone between 18 and 21, it was illegal at that point, what are they going to do about it? They're going to just disappear. They're not going to report this to the police, or just as it was the case when there was a concern about trafficked women.
If the law would change to 21, though, would you make sure that the girl was 21?
Well, I don't...
How would you?
How would one?
Would you ask her and she'd say, I'm 21?
The situation...
Excuse me, how old are you?
It isn't the sort of question one normally asks.
How do you intend to enforce this?
So how do you know
John
that
Mann?
How are you going to enforce it?
John Mann?
if you don't ask?
Precisely.
How do you know that a girl isn't under the age of 18 if you don't ask?
I don't think most men do ask. I don't think they're
They
bothered.
don't care, most.
George McCoy?
It's a question that it wouldn't have even been applicable for a long time. But when...
I mean, I've
You don't ask then, so you don't know whether you've been with a girl that's underage then?
I very much doubt it.
A 16-year-old, 15-year-old who may have been exploited
I'm on your
and
side.
abused.
I want to see vulnerable people, particularly girls on the streets, not being killed. I want to see that. But changing the law does not change people's behaviour. We need positive intervention to stop girls going on the game in the first place, not trying to turn their lives around once they've got an with it.
Yeah, Jeremy, yeah. Good morning.
Good morning, yes. I was hoping to contribute before, but thank you very much. Any law that helps young women not to go in this direction and to reduce the numbers of women indulging in what many would regard as immoral behaviour, it has to be a good thing. So certainly I think this is a society thing. It's not just a case of changing one law. It's not going to stop this sort of abuse. But I think, certainly from a Muslim perspective, from a religious perspective, we need to try and create an environment in which the family is very strong, and there is no need for a woman. A woman shouldn't feel she needs to sell her body in order to live.
I like selling my body. Who are you to tell me I can't do it? I'm very good at what I do. I like it. And I want to do it from 18 years old, so what's your problem? You have your religion and I respect that. You know what? I have a different one. And unfortunately, that means that I have control over my body. The reason why young people in care rebel is because from the minute they're removed from their natural parents, they want to be in the driving seat. And then the social workers get at the side of them and try and tell them what to do, and they rebel against that. And then the reason they get groomed is because someone else sits in the back seat and gives them all the control, or so they think. And that's how they get groomed.
A massive amount of girls on the street have been in local authority care. That tells that tells its own story. Abba?
Well, there's two things I'd like to bring up. Firstly, there's a tendency to always want to legislate. And as a lawyer, having to, as somebody who's gone through the studying system, there's enough law there, I tell you, that to protect people as it is. You don't need to waste this energy in further law. Secondly, we're talking about women all the time here. Hold on a minute. There's male prostitution issues too. Let's discuss those.
John mentioned that as well.
Historically, prostitutes are the people who were the forerunners of the women's liberation movement. They were the first people to use contraceptives. They were the first people to go on and use lipstick. First people to dress up dress themselves up. If we were to go back to what people are suggesting, the logical conclusion is that we end up like Iran.
OK. Anne?
I'm sorry, but the majority of women that are out on the streets today are really struggling with abuse and exploitation.
Yes.
And if that...
I don't doubt that is the case. I am only personally concerned with people...
Can you please attach this law to street sex work and not to indoor sex work?
Yes,
when the vast majority of cases are not attacked.
Although the two are... I think it's
there are no reported cases of murders of indoor sex workers.
Please let Anne answer.
But they're often women go indoors and outdoors. It doesn't
The girls who are on drugs and who work on the streets are not suitable to work in parlours. Parlours need responsible, regular people who are going to turn up for their shift.
Okay, then, isn't the answer ultimately to legalise and properly...
No.
Okay, forget that then.
Decriminalise.
Legalise and properly... Okay, decriminalise and
properly... Changing the law
properly...
doesn't change behaviour.
Properly
regulate.
I'll come with this very simply, and I'm totally in favour of early interventions, and we've done a lot in my area, and I've been in the middle of trying to get that to happen. The people I meet, young boys and young girls, who are involved in this, don't want to do it. They're doing it because they've had major problems in their life. The interventions haven't been good enough. I think that by raising that threshold, that creates more of a space. And I think it does two things. Firstly, it means the behaviour of some of the clients will change.
No.
Do you seriously think...
It will not change.
Do you seriously think that it's a tidal wave of human nature, I suppose, that she would argue... Do you seriously think the police will go against some of these men and go and get them? And make efforts to do so in the current climate.
And attach it to the streets where it belongs, not the indoor work.
Have they got other, they'll look upon it as we've got other stuff to do here.
In areas like mine, the police would act with those powers if they felt that was going on. So they would, and they would arrest the men, and they would charge them. And that in itself will change the behaviour. It's only one small part of dealing with the problem. But I think it will, because I'm seeing a lot of vulnerable young people.
On the streets?
Sorry.
There are 18 to 21-year-olds who have the right to work indoors.
Is this criminalising girls?
Otherwise you're putting them on the streets.
We've seen really clearly what can work to tackle violence against people selling sex. In Merseyside, they treat crimes against people in the sex industry as hate crime, and the police prioritise protection rather than prosecution. Now, they've achieved a 90% conviction rate for crimes of violence against street sex workers. And one of the things that the IOSW is campaigning for is for the rollout of that model of policing nationwide. So that actually successfully targets crimes of violence. And again, if you talk to a wide range of specialist services outside the framework of Beyond the Streets, and I accept that many Beyond the Streets projects do great work. I mean, I know 125 fairly well, and who are based in Bristol. But talking to projects, which I called around quite a lot of projects over the last couple of days, and overwhelmingly they said that this work, that such a law, if passed, would impede their work to support and protect people. It would mean that people were further marginalised, that people were further excluded.
Into the shadows even more.
And that premises that did include people working who are under 21 would no longer give them access.
Audience, yes sir, go on.
As a person of faith, I would say in this regard that the main thing in this regard, the main cause of this particular act. And again, as a person of faith, I think, and I'm 100% sure, and I believe in this, that faithful marriage is the only way that upgrades, that uplifts the status of humanity. I'm talking about what
a lovely world we would live in, this wonderful nirvana where people are faithful and they use religion to be good, and no one's a hypocrite and everyone goes on to the why. It would be a lovely world.
I'll come to you in a minute. Go on, let him finish.
We should look at the cause. Okay, for example, if we're talking about the faithful marriage, right? Faithful marriage doesn't mean that it fulfilling your personal, your physical desire or your lust, right? If we go through a faithful marriage, it really protects women socially, morally, financially,
protects us,
right?
It traps us.
No. I'm coming to that.
Let me come to other people. If you've made a strong point. Yes. Hello.
Yes, I would, maybe this is a very simplistic view, but I will go back to the schools and education, and also creates more jobs for people, so they don't feel that they
wouldn't have made any difference to me.
Well, listen, what about the girl? Can I ask you, we're over here now.
Had a criminal record, how could I get a normal job?
Charlie.
Don't know what you're talking about, mate.
You can go for that special dinner party we're all having later on. And you can, so Helen, the girls that you know that are still doing it, call girls, give us an idea of the type of money that they're making.
They're making a lot of money. I mean,
how much? I mean, give us an idea.
Because it's important.
Because it's important.
It is important because we're talking about whether it should be banned or not. I know girls that are 21 plus doing it that will continue to do it for as long as they can do it.
What are they making? What's the financial lure?
Because they're earning up to £3,000 a week.
Well, there you are, 3,000.
So, 21 plus, I think you're at a stage in life where you can... I personally was at a stage in life where I could make that decision for myself. But what's more important, though, is that there's girls 21 and under that are very vulnerable, they're not mentally stable, and they're being forced into doing it. There is some element of force behind that as well, but the money still drives them to it. But I don't... Sorry, I thought you were going to speak there. No, I think that's the important... There's all different angles to it, really. I don't see the problem with somebody under 21 doing it, to be honest. If that's their choice. I think if there's someone being forced to do it, I think if they're being... they feel like there's no option.
How do we know if it's their choice? Because there's a grey area, isn't there?
Well, I suppose that's where the ban does come in handy, but the ban only comes in handy if the police actually go and, enforce it.
It doesn't increase the choices people have. It doesn't increase the opportunities people
why we
have.
need to put the
It doesn't increase the range of services available. And actually, the majority of services do not take the view that you do.
Let's have this gentleman here who's had his hand. You can in a wee minute. Let's have this man here first.
I mean, society is what it is at the moment. Demand has never diminished.
Oldest profession and all that.
Oldest profession, and I'm quite old. The thing is that I think we should be concentrating more on the girls who've been trafficked and brought into this country and manipulated by criminal gangs. And I think that we've already spoken so far about the voluntary aspect or semi-voluntary aspect of the situation. I think really we need to, that's where the focus and attention ought to be.
Trafficking,
Go on, Charlie.
Trafficking is one issue. And grooming is another. So both women in those camps are very vulnerable, and I am, again, supporting what you're saying in the main. But the biggest problem here is that everyone sat here, bar a couple of people, and everyone watching thinks that all prostitutes are the same, that they're all vulnerable, they're all on drugs, and they're all under 18. Well, hello, there are some 200,000 women actually in the UK working off internet portals right now who choose to do so.
So it is genuinely personal choice and personal autonomy, is it?
And there is a small... on the indoor trade, and I'd like to see the two separated.
Mo answer says otherwise.
Thank
you, Charlie.
I think we have to recognise, which is what I think Anne has also said, there were some reports out last year which said that the UK is the sex trafficking capital of the world. We have 122 serious acts of sexual violence against women.
But that's an immigration issue, if you don't mind me saying, because we relaxed who we let into the country. We didn't have this 20 years ago.
The point is, we have problems with approaching issues of sex and sexuality within the West.
We didn't have this problem when I started working in the 80s, I'm sorry.
Sex trafficking has always been around, and violence against women has always been around.
Who's a tougher opponent, Charlie or Tommy Robinson?
I don't think I'd like to be stuck between either of them.
The thing is that we opened the floodgates for immigration and we let a lot of people in, and I'm sorry, I have worked directly with Operation Rampart. I have no idea what your experience in trafficking is.
What about them? Do you see a lot of traffic? OK, Charlie, do you see a lot of trafficked girls?
Yes, I see them all over the place, and I'll tell you why. Because trafficking is defined by the Home Office as taking a lady to her place of work. Suppose you are a lady who wants to work at a massage parlour. If you live in Manchester, say, you don't particularly fancy the idea of your uncle or your brother-in-law coming into the parlour where you might work, so you decide to work somewhere further away, Preston, say. So you contact a parlour in Preston. The parlour in Preston sends her brother round to pick you up at the station when you arrive there. He is guilty of trafficking you because he's taken you from the station to the parlour.
So do you believe these figures are inflated?
So, yes, of course they are.
John Mann.
Oh, there's a real issue.
There's no women in my area who are trafficked.
I bet I can find one.
Well,
I bet I can find one. I'll show you where to look. I promise you, I'll show you where to look.
John Mann.
They've moved around the country. They're not logistically set in one area. There are 5 main groups of people who move
Charlie, let's give John's launching his legislation. Let's give John
the men and the women.
Well, you've had a lot to say.
The young men and the young women that I've dealt with are people who've had major problems. The vast majority of them have been on heroin. And that is why they're involved in this trade. They've been getting in... Not in the street trade, no. Not in the street trade in my area, right? And what is needed in my area and has worked is those early interventions. What hasn't helped is the fact that the trade is legal. and we've found it easier to get people aged 16 and 17 and younger and get those interventions in. The 18, 19, 20-year-olds, the same space should be there. This is a small little change, and it will certainly help people in my area.
Thank you all very much for braving the gauntlet this morning. Thank you for coming in and being a great audience on the big questions. Happy Easter to everyone. We'll be back on April the 15th from Brighton, but from now it is goodbye from everyone here in...
I wouldn't have got off the streets if that had been the case, because brothels in the 80s back then were not regulated as such, but there was a code of conduct at that time that said if you're underage you don't get to work here. So I wouldn't have even got off the streets.
George, you are the author of the British Massage Parlour Guide. If you were with a girl, would it trouble you if she was 17 or 18?
Obviously it would trouble me if she was under 18, yes.
Yeah.
But
if she was 18 or over, would that trouble you?
I wouldn't have thought so, no. No. The essence of the situation is...
Threshold, and I think if you raise the threshold, it gives the police the ability to do something about it, and I think it will have an impact, because I think it will impact on people's behaviour.
Charlie, you're shaking your head.
I wish it would. Can I just say to you that I grew up in care. I'm one of the statistics 60 times more likely to end up homeless, in prison, on the game. I'd managed all three by the time I was 21. And no law would have stopped me from walking the streets. And furthermore...
Why was that? What was the impetus?
Because I needed milk and nappies for my baby. And furthermore...
that if we're talking about the girls on the streets, there are laws adequate to safeguard them insofar as there are curb crawling laws which stop men from doing that there. And in the massage parlours, which have been visited by the Hidden Economy Task Force to make sure that the people in there are paying tax, they're all of the right age, that they're not from abroad. And this didn't receive much publicity.
Are there lots of girls who are 18, 19?
There are girls who are 18 and 19 there, yes, but there are men who are 18 and 19 and 20 going off to Afghanistan and come back in a coffin. There has to be a point at which you become an adult and are responsible for what you do, and that has been decided to be 18.
So if you're allowed to,
with very vulnerable young women, and indeed also with a group of very vulnerable young men. And I come from this, having done a lot of work in my area on drugs, and young people on drugs, and a lot of work as well on young people who've been thrown out of home or who have left home.
But it's not working at the moment, John. This is the big point. It's not being properly enforced at the moment, the 18 rule, because this is get-out clause. I thought she was 18, so it's not working now. What makes you think that the group of people who use these services, who perhaps have less of a regard for morality, perhaps, less of a regard for the law, are going to have any more regard with a new statute?
Well, there is a threat.
Well, the MP for Bassett Law has already spoken. John Mann is piloting a private member's bill through Parliament to make it a crime to have sex with a prostitute who is under 21. Teenage prostitutes mainly work from the streets, the most dangerous place to be. The majority of them have been in care and end up on heroin. Should it be illegal to pay for sex with a young adult? Why do you think this will work, John Mann?
Well, I think it'll work because it'll change. It won't solve all the problems, of course it won't, but I think it'll have an impact because I think it'll change the culture that's there, and it'll create a breathing space to allow more intervention.